Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we're talking about the 70-30 Muay Thai stance. 70% of the weight on the front foot, 30% of the weight on the back foot. I've also have written a more detailed blog down in the description below, so make sure to check that out. Without further ado, let's get started. Let's start with the stance itself. So I'm gonna take my fight stance here. The 70% on the front leg, all you gotta do is put your back heel up, and then your body weight is gonna shift towards that front leg. Oftentimes, your stance is usually still about shoulder width. Of course, you can make it a little bit wider or a little bit shorter, but usually ends up being about shoulder width. Very important, guys, that we still keep our head behind our toes. I don't wanna be pushing so much forward that all of a sudden it becomes a 90-10 and I'm falling over my toes, all right, guys? So even though this leg's a little bit heavier, and this leg is lighter, I still want to keep that base. I still want to keep it at that balance. Hands up, rhythm back and forth, and this is going to be the 70-30 stance. I actually use this stance a ton. And a lot of people, when they see me even just teaching or fighting or sparring, they always ask me, like, why do you put your heel up? We're gonna get right into it. It allows for baiting, and that is one of the biggest strategies and aspects of this stance. When I put my body weight forward, it puts some enticing targets forward for the opponent to want to hit. One of them, of course, is the head. My head is closer to the opponent, right? Now they want to hit. As soon as they want to hit that target, I can easily pull it back and counterattack with my own weapons. And that is the reason this stance is so effective when it comes to counterattacking. It's because I'm a little bit closer and I'm able to pull back further, meaning since I'm forward here, I have all this wiggle room to be able to pull back and be safe. If I'm at the 50 stance or even further, right, on the back leg, I can only pull back so much. Meaning if the person attacks me with a double attack, a double jab, right, or a triple combination, then they might be able to catch me a lot easier if I'm in the middle or in the back foot, because I can only pull back so much. When I'm on the front foot, I'm able to pull back a lot further, so it allows me to be safer, it allows me to get that target out there to bait the opponent and then pull back and counterattack. Some of the famous techniques to use or weapons to use for this type of strategy, for this type of stance, is the pull back cross. I can be here, my opponent attacks, I can pull back, cross a lot easier when this foot is light, this foot is heavy, and I'm able to have all that wiggle room. Another one is going to be the lean back and attack. So since this foot is light, I'm able to move it a lot easier. I'm able to push off this leg, and then all of a sudden, I can lean back a lot further and counterattack either with a kick, a punch, right, an elbow, whatever it is. So the pull back is very, very essential when it comes to this type of stance, the pull back and the lean backs. Now, the second part of this stance is that, of course, since this leg is a lot lighter, your power leg's a lot lighter, you're able to throw long techniques, right, like the teeps and like your rear power kick, right, like the cross as well. But you're gonna be able to do it a lot more often because, again, since this leg is lighter, you can attack a lot more, either for a counterattack or just for attack itself. And if I'm landing powerful kicks, if I'm pushing my opponent back aggressively, if I'm landing powerful crosses, right, then that means that my opponent wants to get back to me. He wants to be like, hey, I want to hurt this person as well. And then as soon as they try to hurt, we're able to pull back. The second, or one of the other weapons that actually helps out a lot, is the jab. Since my weight is forward, the jab is a little bit closer to my opponent. I'm able to bother a little bit more, meaning that since I'm bothering, I'm measuring that distance and I'm enticing my opponent to attack even further because I'm bothering them, and now they're like, hey, like, I don't want to be bothered, I need to stop this opponent from coming in, let me throw an attack. As soon as they throw the attack, I'm able to pull back, throw a technique, I'm able to even do a hook, right? I can do a check hook off that. I can do different types of techniques by luring them and bothering with that jab. Those are some of the weapons that you can use when it comes to this type of stance, the 70-30 stance. Now let's talk about some of the cons of the stance. Just like any stance, there's no bad stance, there is no good stance. You gotta learn how to use them all, but know that there's different strategies to be able to use each one of them, right? For this stance, it's going to be the baiting aspect. Now, the cons of this stance is that, well, since you're really heavy on this front leg, Low kicks might be a little bit harder to block because now you're too heavy on this leg and it's going to be harder for you to pick up this leg to block those kicks, right? And also, if you are pulling back and you forget to keep your legs under you, meaning that, let's say I pull back, but then I might see the opponent coming with more attacks, I might want to shift my whole body weight with me as opposed to just keep pulling back. And that happens a lot where the person might throw 2 or 3 attacks. I'm pulling back, and then all of a sudden I'm in the back foot and I'm not able to pull back any further. But since I'm so used to doing that, I want to trying to keep that strategy, and then I start to get hit because the person is throwing more than one attack. They're doubling up on their attacks. They're throwing triple, four attacks at the same time, and just putting me on the back foot. Gabriel Vargas, which has an amazing YouTube channel here as well, did this against Lorzilla. Lorzilla is a Muay Femur that we're doing kickboxing, and he's also very used to baiting the opponent and doing these type of pullbacks, right? But Gabriel was throwing those double techniques, right? Those triples, really getting long distance with his combos and putting Lorzilla in that back leg where he could not pull back any further. And from there, he started hitting Lorzilla, and he won that kickboxing fight against Lorzilla. So again, this type of strategy works very, very well against a Muay Femur, a person that uses that 70-30 stance and likes to pull back and counter. Now let's put everything together into the Muay Femur style. Remember, a Muay Femur has high IQ, and he loves to counterattack, he loves to bait, but he also loves to fight on points and knows the game, right? Knows the game, meaning that one stance is not better than the other. You gotta use all of them. You might see a Muay Femur be here for baiting, but all of a sudden they might pull back to a short stance to use their teeps, or they might pull forward to that same short stance and use their teeps. They might get a little bit wider for some stronger punches, right? Just remember, guys, that one stance is not the only stance that you're allowed to use in the fight. It might be a stance that you're comfortable with, a stance that helps you score higher, get those knockouts, and feel a little bit more defensive, right? When it comes to the attacks, you're able to defend from that stance a lot better. But it's not the only stance that you can use. A lot of times people will fight like this stance is better than another, like this is the proper stance. There is no exact proper stance, right? There is a stance that, for example, I like to teach, which is just 50-50, because from here it's easy for me to go to the other stances with one step, one shift of the body, right? But there's different type of stances. Eventually, you're gonna find the style that works best for you. And eventually, as you keep training, you're gonna be able to learn how to use all of the stances, because some stances are better for certain things than others. And you need to be able to shift the body weight to get to those stances during the fight. Again, even if you're a Muay Femur that likes to bait, you wanna be able to still pull back and use those teeps, right? Teeps is a very great weapon to use, and you'll see Muay Femurs use it a ton. But you'll see them also take that step to shift their weight. Take the step either forward, take the step either back to shift the weight and get into that stance. And then they might go back right into this 70-30% stance to keep going with the strategy, that baiting strategy, that pullback counter strategy, right, guys? So make sure to use all the stances if you want to become a more well-rounded fighter. Remember, guys, to check out the blog post down in the description below where I go into more detail about the 70-30% Muay Thai stance. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that share button, like button, and see you guys in the next video.